Hello, I'm Esther Githo-Yuot. It's Wednesday, November 9th. This is Africa 54.
With U.S. midterm election votes still being counted, latest tallies show the Democratic Party ahead in the Senate but behind the Republicans in the House of Representatives. African and other nations are taking the COP27 climate summit podium in Egypt to call on wealthier countries to help them pay for climate change adaptations. Our tech segment today focuses on a young Sierra Leonean in Pennsylvania who's making a big footprint with her Dija shoes. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
We begin in the United States, where several races in the midterm elections are still too close to call, including a tight Senate race in the southern state of Georgia. At this time, it remains unclear if Democrats will retain their narrow majorities in the House and Senate, or if Republicans will take control. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports from Georgia.
Americans voting on the direction the country will take for the next 2 years, choosing if it is time for Republican leadership or if President Joe Biden will continue to have the support of a Democratic Congress.
I definitely want to keep the House blue, so I made sure to vote Democrat.
More than a third of the U.S. Senate was up for re-election this year. Republicans needed to win just one additional seat to overcome Democrats' narrow majority. Democrats had an early loss in Florida, where Congresswoman Val Demings,
our democracy, it still matters,
failed to beat Republican Senator Marco Rubio.
When you see the results across this country tonight, that's what it's all about. The people who make this country great have been forgotten.
A handful of Senate races still too close to call will determine which party has the majority. In Georgia, the vote count is narrowly split between Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker and Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, who reminded supporters of the stakes of this election.
Because women and their right to choose is on the ballot. We got to show up tomorrow.
An argument that resonated with many female and independent voters in the suburbs.
I am voting for things to stay Democrat, to be honest, just because of all the abortion right issues. That's really important to me, that a woman still have the right to choose. So that swayed my opinion strongly in the way that I voted.
Historically, the party in power loses midterm elections. For some Georgia voters, this election is an opportunity to express their dissatisfaction with Biden.
I don't think he's made many of his own decisions. I think he's more of a spokespiece for this far left and special interests.
All 435 U.S. House seats were also up for re-election, with Democrats securing some key early wins in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. There were isolated reports of delays in casting and counting ballots, some due to machine malfunction. But overall, the voting around the country ran smoothly. Officials may not be able to finalize results for several more days. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Atlanta, Georgia.
For more election analysis, VOA News Center executive producer Steve Radish joins me. Steve, bring us up to speed on major winners and losers.
The big winner looks like Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader. It looks like he selected the kind of quality candidates necessary to win a tight election. And it looks like the Republicans are going to have a small majority, certainly not the wave majority that many expected, but a small majority in the House of Representatives. Another winner Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a 20-point blowout in his re-election bid, and that sent a signal to perhaps, if you want to characterize the biggest losers of this election, are the election denialists, those who followed the false narrative of ex-President Donald Trump in believing that the last election was stolen and casting doubt on the future of elections. So that's where the winners and losers kind of stack up.
So do you see this as a sign of changes to come in the 2024 presidential election?
That's going to be a great election. DeSantis certainly showed that he's got some strength coming out of Florida. We do expect, and he's been teasing us for several days and weeks, Donald Trump as far as running for president. What this also does on the Democratic side, it gives President Joe Biden a little bit more stability and a little bit more reason to think that maybe he should run for president in 2024. Whether or not that happens will remain to be seen, but it wasn't the big blowout that Democrats feared, and it gives President Biden a little bit more strength to carry on.
You know, this is a surprise because we still don't know who is going to carry the House, the Senate, whether something is going to change between now and another couple of hours. But what surprised you most about this election?
The biggest surprise is that the fact that the Republicans did not win by larger margins in the House of Representatives. They expected to be able to use the economy as a big political selling point. Also, the strength of the anti-abortion of the abortion rights vote, that was very strong, and the youth vote. If it weren't for the millennials and Gen Z, the Democrats would have had a much bigger loss.
Well, Steve, we have yet to see what's going to happen in the next couple of hours. We'll have you tomorrow again to do this for us. Steve Reddish is executive producer for Central News. Thank you so much, Steve. It was a successful night for Somali American politicians, including Ilhan Omar, the most prominent Somali American politician who won re-election for her Minnesota 5th district seat. For more perspective, let's turn to VOA Somali's senior editor, Harun Maruf. Harun, tell us more about the Somali American winners.
Yeah, the Somali American wave. 2 Somali Americans have won their elections. In Minnesota, there were 2 candidates. 8 of them won. 2 won in Ohio and another 2 in Maine. Ohio, Minnesota, and Maine are some of the heavily populated states in the United States for the Somali community. And the main winners are Ilhan Omar, who was elected for the 3rd time to the Congress. But there are also newcomers, a young lady who's just turned 25, Zainab Mohammed. She's going to become the youngest Black Muslim state Senate member in Minnesota. We have also Deqadala in May. In Maine, she made a history last year when she became the first Somali American mayor of a U.S. city. She's now being elected to the state house. She will be joined by a young candidate. Her name is Mana Abdi. She will also become a member of the state legislature. In Ohio, they are also making history. 2 Somalis for the first time entered the state house legislatives. So there's big wins for Somali Americans.
Do you think that the Somali American community makes the most winners in terms of those candidates with African roots vying for elected positions here in the U.S.?
Somali American women were the biggest winners. I can say that because 7 out of the 12 winners last night were women, and they have been performing magnificently. And that's in a quite contrast to the situation of Somali women back home, which they are struggling in getting enough representation in the parliament. For instance, in the last 2 elections, women in Somalia have failed to get 30% in the 2 houses of the parliament. That's the percentage that they were allocated by male politicians. So still they were not able to get the number that they were promising. But in the diaspora, the situation is quite different because women in the diaspora have opportunities that women back home do not have. They can be elected in their neighborhoods, they can campaign freely, and they can be supported locally, their education institutions, and also their local community. But in Somalia, people who are joining the parliament have to be selected by clan elders. And the clan elders usually favor men. So that's why women back home have restrictions.
Let me tell you, the girls in Somalia, the women in Somalia are watching the Somali American women winning posts here in the US. So don't be surprised next polls. Harun, thank you very much. Thank you. Harun Maruf is VOA's Somali editor. Nigerian-American Democrat Adeoye Oye Owalewa has retained his position as U.S. representative in the District of Columbia, while first-generation Ghanaian-American Adrian Boafo, a Democrat, ran unopposed in the state of Maryland. Both were here on Africa 54 this week, and they have won. And joining me now is another winner, Wala Blige, who ran unopposed for Prince George's County Council member in Maryland. Wala, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, congratulations again. And tell me, what inspired you, first of all, to get into politics? And you have roots from both Liberia and Nigeria, right?
Yes, I do. And I would say a lot of the roots in Prince George's County, we're unique. It's supposed to be one of the wealthiest African-American communities in the United States. However, one of the reasons that we have the wealth is because of the many Africans that we have in the community in Prince George's County. We work hard, and Africans want to show that they are able to at least buy nice houses and everything. But we don't really have a seat at the table. You wouldn't know from the leadership. And that was what inspired me this time. I said, when I run for council, I want to make sure that the continental Africans have a seat at the table.
You say you want them to have a seat at the table. So what are your core concerns right now and the priorities that you want to give the people of Prince George's County?
Well, number one of the things is minority-owned businesses, especially Africans. We own about 40% of the businesses in Prince George's County, but yet and still, when it comes to giving resources to minority-owned businesses, making sure that they have a level playing field, there are issues with that. So I want to make sure we focus on that. Another thing I want to make sure we focus on is the proper development. We live in beautiful communities, beautiful homes, but in and around us we have very limited retail, things that we can take advantage of. And many of us feel like there's redlining, racism in that, that many of these retailers will go into white communities, will not come into an African-American community. So we want to make sure that people understand if we have the community that people have, gated communities, beautiful homes, we should have quality things right in our neighborhoods.
You know, this is not the first time you've been in politics, but this time you ran unopposed?
Well, actually, I only ran unopposed in the general. In the general. So in the primary, it was an all-out war. We had a 5-way race. Prince George's County for the council, for all of the positions in Prince George's County, we're a Democratic county. So Republicans don't run. So usually in a general, we don't have race. Our race is in a primary. And in a primary, I was the only African in my race. And many use the African background as to think that I wouldn't win. I did not have any political support. The political backing was all with my opponents. I even had someone who was a former elected official running. Five-way race. We had the most competitive race in the county. And we thought it was going to be close. We ended up winning with 1,200 votes.
Just a little away from politics, Wala, you've been involved in community, events. You've pushed, up the people of Prince George's County. You are a legal expert. Talk just a little bit about the things you were able to do from your perspective as a lawyer.
Well, I would say my biggest pride is my show, Chat with the Lawyer. I put that together because many in our community, including those in the African community, will find that we have issues in the county, issues in our community, and we don't know our legal rights or even lawyers that can help us. So it was really about connecting the community with quality lawyers. I had a show, we talked about issues and even used that to help people. I remember with the Liberians had the DED issue. We connected them with lawyers, but we also even connect them with the elected officials that we needed. So I'm really going to use that when I go into the council because one thing I realize is that while Africans, we have the numbers, we don't have the leadership that represents us at all the levels, especially in the state of Maryland where we have high numbers.
I think they're very lucky to have you. A legal mind, a politician, and someone who wants to move the community forward. Wala, thank you very much for joining us. Wala Bligay, we appreciate your work in the Prince George's County. So let's move on to another story. More than 3,000 new military recruits are now in training as the Congolese army looks to step up its fight against the M23 rebels. Congo alleges that neighboring Rwanda is supporting M23. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Marching through the streets of Goma, thousands attended the call made last week by the Democratic Republic of Congo's president, Felix Tshisekedi, to join the armed forces and fight against the rebels. 27-year-old Edson Bishura is an entrepreneur from Goma. He has a bachelor's degree in economics.
I call on other young people to come and follow in our steps, my friends. Look at me, I am a graduate. But I came to the army because I have faith. I left everything and accepted to come to our army to fight.
In October, the M23 rebels seized control of 2 major towns and doubled their territory in eastern DRC after fierce fighting with the Congolese army. Congo's government then ordered the Rwandan ambassador Vincent Karega to leave the country, reacting to the M23's seizing of both Kiwanja and Rushuru centers near their shared border.
Today in North Kivu alone, we have more than 3,000 candidates who have accepted the call of the head of state so that we can put the M23 and their allies in the Rwandan army out of action.
Congo has repeatedly accused Rwanda of backing rebels, an allegation Rwanda has repeatedly denied. The recruits who marched and exercised on the streets and public spaces of Goma encouraged others to join. Foreign ministries of the DRC and Rwanda met in Angola last weekend to accelerate the process towards de-escalating hostilities in the eastern part of the country. At a July summit between Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi, a ceasefire was agreed to, but the clashes continued. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
In other news, officials say at least 4 people were killed in Nigeria and a dozen more injured on Tuesday following a blast at a popular market in the southeastern state of Anambra. Officials say at least 20 people were killed in Congo this week in an attack in the village of Boku in Kwamuth, Maidombe province. And thousands of demonstrators from Sudan's Nuba people marched in Khartoum Wednesday to protest against recent deadly inter-ethnic violence in their southern home region. Leaders from poor countries are criticizing wealthy governments and oil companies for driving global warming. They are demanding at Egypt's COP27 climate summit that rich countries pay up for damages being inflicted on their economies. Ilan Rubens reports.
Leaders from emerging economies and poorer countries are using their speeches at Egypt's COP27 climate summit on Tuesday to criticize wealthy governments and oil companies for driving global warming, demanding they pay up for damages being inflicted on their economies. Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Philip Davis.
The realities of war, economic headwinds, the hangover from the pandemic, and competition among world powers cannot be used as justification not to confront these imminent dangers. Let's get real. It's only going to get worse.
Small island states, by increasingly violent ocean storms and rising sea levels, called on oil companies to shell out some of their huge recent profits, while developing African states called for more international funds. President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame.
The most valuable contribution that the developed countries can make is to reduce their emissions faster, while investing with Africa to build sustainable green power.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa added that the continent needs a predictable, appropriate and at-scale funding stream and technological support. Senegal's President Macky Sall said poor developing countries in Africa would resist calls for an immediate shift from fossil fuels if it is needed to boost their economies.
Let's be clear. We are for the climate. We are in favor of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. But Africa cannot accept that our vital interests are undermined on the matter of the energy transition.
The comments reflected the tension in international climate negotiations between rich and poor states, as delegates attended the second full day of the two-week UN conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. Scores of other heads of state and government were scheduled to speak on Tuesday, but many of the world's biggest polluters, including the United States, China and India, were not on Tuesday's schedule.
That was Ilan Rubens of Reuters reporting. It's time for a technology report, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. Today we have a fascinating story about a young entrepreneur from Sierra Leone who was on the verge of literally taking her own life. But faced with adversity, she turned her passion for shoes into a business. She taught herself how to design and make shoes in her basement. As a result, her footwear brand Dija is generating a buzz. I spoke to Khadija Ashen, founder of creative and designer of Dija brand in York, Pennsylvania. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about your fashion brand. You've recently come up with a brand. It's in the works. You've done some amazing stuff. How is that going?
It is going well. Of course, business is slow when you are not known, but then notwithstanding, my brand is called Disha's Touch Designs. As I said, I am a mom of three, struggling, had no job. America is difficult. And I was sitting one day, wanted to commit suicide. I said, God, if this is my life, why don't you take my life already? Became clinically depressed. And then I got really sick with diabetes. Before you know it, that same day that I wanted to commit to suicide, after praying, I fell asleep right on the floor. And I had a dream. I saw myself making shoes. And I woke up, I only had $100 to my name. And so I went to Walmart. I started buying shoes, sneakers and stuff. I came home, pulled them apart and started making them. But I used African fabric to First I started wrapping. Before you know it, now we're into full production where we make the shoes from scratch using African fabric. It's my own way of flying my flag. Deja means light, which is part of my name. And so whoever wears my brand, I want them to be able to experience that light. It's your choice to make. We have been given the mandates, the power to take charge, to take control. So would you do that now? It starts from you. Trust me, you will not get there if you don't start with yourself.
Deja brand. Where are you making these shoes? You said you are in full, full gear. Are you making any sales, or you are just maybe using using whatever comes out to facilitate all the projects that you're doing?
Yes, we do have. As I speak to you, I just finished a collection for the fall, and we have over 300 pairs of shoes that is ready to go. So if you go to Dija's Touch, DIJAS Touch.com, you will be able to make a purchase there. We are in full gear running. This is something that I intend to take back home, where we will create jobs for the young people. And so the factory, we want to build our own factory where we can manufacture shoes using recycled stuff from home.
Now, where are you making the shoes?
Right here in my home, in my basement.
Interesting. So,
would you like to see?
Absolutely. Wow, I like the branding too,
It's called Deja. Just as you go to Macy's,
right?
You have style. This is for men's. The color picture, the colors of it, the size, and this is what it is.
Beautiful. So literally, you've turned your basement into a shoe factory.
This is work for us, and these are the models of what we do. This is the other pattern, the lace one. I use my brokenness, my hurt, my pain to create things, and that's how I self-heal myself. And sometimes people don't understand it, but then I love it.
How did you learn to make shoes?
I am praying that we're able to sell all that shoes, because all my life savings has gone into it. I invested in myself, went to different places, different countries. I would sit on the street and looking at a shoemaker making shoes. I've been to Italy. I want to go to China, then COVID hit. So I haven't been able to go to China yet, because then if I learn from them, then my work becomes easier. So it's difficult right now, really. Business is very slow, but if each one wears a pair of sneakers and starts showcasing on social media and this and that, before you know it, I become busy.
You are coming up with a book very soon, talking about some of your life lessons, things that you have personally gone through. When is that book coming out?
So the name of my book is called She Arose, Understanding Psychology of Winning. This is my life lessons. And these are things that I think we need right now. It is very timely, talking about self-discipline, self-pity, and all of these things.
It's remarkable that you're able to do that.